Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Good Stuff. I'm Kevin Bille, and as always, we appreciate you joining us today. Well, I got to be careful here with my Ohio listeners, but I have with us today the head men's basketball coach at Oral Roberts, Paul Mills. Paul, it's good to have you.
Great to be here. The coolest thing I've been a part of is that sign behind you. That's that is an awesome recognition for a show.
Well, my 5-year-old can draw better than I can, so I relied on him for that. So,
I love it.
well, hey, I got to jump in right away to this Ohio State game. Of course, you screwed up everybody's brackets in the office, at home, and everywhere in general. When it comes to playing a game like that, like here's my take. From being in that seat, it was like, we need to be perfect if we have any chance at all. I think going into the game with the coaches, or maybe when the game started, I thought, man, we might have a chance. Or you know what, going into the game, realistically, we thought we had a shot. I don't want to speak for you, but I know you guys had some games on your schedule that might have led to that third one. But honestly, can you tell me what your mindset was going into that game?
Yeah, I thought we would win. Never doubted it. Never questioned it. It helps when you get up 7-0 to open the game, and then the next thing it was 10-10. But honestly, thought we had the players to win. We had an approach to win. Felt like we were really solid with our guys understanding what needed to occur in order to win. I think so. From all of those perspectives, I honestly thought we could win the game. I mean, the reality is when you go into an NCAA tournament, is you're gonna play somebody good.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're not getting away from
Right.
playing anybody who isn't good. And so we weren't going to get caught up with a number. Or we weren't going to get caught up with a name. We were going to get caught up in what is it? What do we need to do in order to win a game? And I honestly thought we would. And we were fortunate to.
Yeah, I love that approach. I got to be transparent though, Coach. Like, I didn't know much about you, and really didn't know much about your guys, but I immediately became attached after hearing your first post game. I saw it on Twitter. I played it for my boys, and two things stuck out to me. Number one, your faith, which resonates in our family. And anytime there's opportunities like that, our boys are 14, 11, and 5. I think it's great to share that with them. But then the type of program that you have in terms of people and values. So those things resonated to me right off the bat. Can you speak to those things a little bit here as we get started?
Sure. I think the thing that you mentioned, referencing the Ohio State game, is I talked about two of our players,
Yes.
Kevin O'Banner and Max A. Smith, and they played well, and talked about their work ethic and the things that they did in order to become good players. But that it wasn't just them; that we actually had a locker room full of those guys. And even though they were two very talented players, it was a group inside of that locker room that really committed themselves to their craft and putting in time. And the thing that we talked about in order to be good was one, you had to work. So you did have to have a work ethic, regardless of what it was. And then two, we did talk about humility and the need to have humility in all facets of our life. We're not entitled to anything. I can recall my first 3 years coaching, and inner city kids who didn't have much. We came from very similar socioeconomic situations, the way I grew up, and the kids that I had the opportunity to coach. So I would take them to McDonald's after a game, and they were thank you, greatly appreciated. Because for some of them, that may have been their only meal that day. And then 3 years later, I went to a different school that was in the suburbans where they had some money, and we would take them to Chili's, and they would be like, Chili's, ugh. And I remember thinking to myself, I would rather coach the guys who were thankful for McDonald's rather than the people who felt they were entitled to something that they didn't agree with. I do not like giving a kid a pair of shoes and they're like, ugh,
Right.
these are what? I've never even heard of these. And it's like, oh man, like I will snatch those things from you so quick. The entitlement mentality just really bothers me. And we're not entitled to anything. Scripture tells us that our very next breath is a gift. It tells us that, hey, don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow has enough worries on its own. Like you need to be able to be appreciative and capitalize on these particular moments. And so I say all of that to say humility holds a very high standard from our coaches. As I share with our team, we are mutually coaching each other. You are coaching me, and I am coaching you. This is not a one-way street.
Mm-hmm.
This is, we are mutually discipling each other. We are mutually coaching each other. We are mutually in this together. And the way that that works is if both of us come into this as we're not entitled to anything, and we have a mentality of humility. That there's obviously a passage in Luke where Jesus tells the disciples, I came to serve, not to be served. Now, if there's anybody who could be served, I would tell you it's the guy who told the sun to rise up this morning. Hey, you know what? I should probably, yeah, you probably deserve the right to be served. He says, I didn't come to serve, to be served. I came to serve and to give my life a ransom for many. And we understand that word many means the whole world, according to John 3:16. And so we're going to take on that approach. We're not entitled to anything. I don't care what your numbers say. I don't care what your title says. I don't care how important I think I am or you think you are. We are going to approach this with a level of humility that's important. And how do I know if I have humility? I work. I
Right.
work because that's the display of humility. I'm not owed anything. And
Mm-hmm.
so from those two, they're actually something that we talk about quite a bit.
It's really interesting. I don't want to get off track here, but I got to ask you while I'm thinking of it and just, um, talking to some others about your reading. What would you say, like, how much did it impact you, or what was it like growing up in a predominantly black neighborhood, as a white family? And was some of these things that you're talking about right now, were they rooted in you from your parents, and that's just something that you've carried on?
Yeah, one, I can't imagine growing up any differently. I wouldn't trade it because it's carved me. It's helped me. There's certain things that we know about God and our destinies, right? Um, if you're male or female, we know that that's God's intention. If you're white or black, um, green, red, brown, whatever it may be, if whoever your parents are, these are situations that we know that God had pre-planned beforehand. And so from that, we carve out experiences because of our socioeconomic situations, because of our demographics, because of our parents, all of those situations. So for me, I wouldn't trade any of it in hindsight. Did I want to trade it then? Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, when you're in the midst of it and you're going through it, but it's hard to have a perspective at those particular moments. The perspective actually comes later. As I heard Chuck Swindoll, the pastor out of Dallas, say one time, he said, look back over the last 5 years of your life and see if you can see God's hand, because it's hard sometimes to see it during it. And so as I go back 5 years and I see the path and all that's involved, man, then it becomes super evident to me that I see God's hand. Did my parents help me tremendously? My father was a pastor, so my mother was super committed to all that involved my dad's job, and but she was super committed to our family. And so from that perspective, the best thing that I feel that parents can give their children is to model what a loving relationship looks like, and that's what they gave me. And so we're told that marriage mimics the church, the way that Jesus loves the church. And so I watched that modeled in front of me day in and day out. And so because of that, because of my situation where I grew up and because I saw that modeled in me day in and day out. I've been very privileged, and I don't think of it any other way.
For sure. That's great. Going back to the team, like, was there a certain point where you could just feel it or sense it that this team was special? Like, I know those two individuals you just mentioned, the clip, and maybe I should have watched it again before I talked to you, but the clip I remember showing my kids is no different. We tried to make 10,000 shots over the summer right now, right? And so I think, the one student athlete you referred to was there for like 6 weeks and did that in 6 days or whatever, like 10,
Yeah,
12,000. And so I shared that right away, right? Because if it's
it
coming
was
from me,
20,000, but go
20,000,
ahead.
wow. Yeah. Even so when it comes from dad, it doesn't make as much sense, but when I can use that as a vehicle. But
Yeah.
I got to think as a coach, I remember special players like that. And when you have those type players, you feel pretty good about what's ahead. Is that kind of what you sensed early on?
Well, Kevin O'Banner is a young man we're referencing, and he led the nation in pick and pop. Was the best pick and pop guy in the country. Was actually a 190 guy, and as you know, there's only 6 players in the NBA who were ever 180 guys.
Hmm.
And so at the college level, it's different. But he was 50% from three, 50% from two, and 90% from the free throw line.
Wow.
And so all of that adds up to 190. He did that in our conference. And so for him, he was making about 3,500 shots a day, because he wanted to get it done. He wanted to show that he was ready to work, and he was extremely motivated. And so he put in the time and did it, and lived in the gym. You
Yeah.
basically have to in order to do 3,500 shots a day, to knock that out over the course of 6 days. So for him, I just knew that's who he was. I knew it was a guy who had come to college. He wanted to be really good. He was going to spend the time. We had to rotate graduate assistants with him who rebounded for him because they couldn't stay with him the whole time. And he would come in, usually about 4 times a day. He'd get 500-600 in the morning, come back around lunchtime, get 500 or 600, come back, probably shoot 1,000 in the evenings, and probably get another, 1,000 after lunch at 4, and then he'd come back at 10. And so we had to rotate a number of different people in with him, in order to allow that stuff to happen. So from that perspective, I just knew we had a guy who really worked, but you want to see it translate.
Hmm.
So you want to see it in big moments, and he was able to do that on the stage presented by the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, good player. First name Kevin. That's why I think coach. No, but man, yeah, what that's impressive. That's a good problem to have when you got to find all those different rebounders, right?
Yes,
Uh,
absolutely.
such a peculiar season, right? I mean, so much had happened, never knowing what was going on from one day to the next. What do you think that you learned about yourself, maybe, or just in general?
Well, I would tell you that in order to have this season pulled off, you not only had to have a mature group, but you had to have a group who thought about other people. Because if one person messed it messed it up for about 70 other people, 30 people associated with our team, from trainers to GAs to student coaches to players. But you also messed up the other team. Their group couldn't play.
Right.
So their players, their coaches, their GAs, their student coaches.
Sure.
So you messed it up. So one person saying, you know what? I think I'm going to go to a restaurant tonight with this young lady that I just met, and not knowing the situation and the environment. And nobody would be mad at you at any other time. But in this year, you had to make sacrifices and think of the greater good. And that's a heck of a lesson, right? It's the ability to think beyond myself and thinking decisions here are going to impact other people, and I don't want my decisions here to impact other people negatively. So, what I need to do is make decisions that are going to impact other people positively, and they may never even hear about it.
Right.
These are decisions that are behind closed doors that nobody will ever even know that I sacrificed an opportunity to go to a restaurant with this young lady that I just met. Nobody will know that I chose not to gather with my friends over at their apartment, but I'm doing this for the greater good. And so I think from that perspective, as I tell our guys, you have to get over yourself. It takes a team in order to get this done. So we can't just think me, me, me. And so from that context, I thought it was valuable.
Yeah, that's really good. Really good. Hey, coach, back in the day, I know you were point guard and just playing the same position. I'm anxious to hear what you think just about that specific role or position and how that translates to coaching, especially given the fact that all the decision making that goes into both roles.
Yeah, when I played, really fell in love with it in the seventh grade, but in the eighth grade, there's 6-minute quarters in eighth grade junior high basketball in the state of Texas. So I averaged right around 18 points a game. So Michael Jordan at the time was averaging 37. And I said, well, they play 12-minute quarters, so let's double my 18. So
Right
I
there.
would average 36. So I'm not that far behind Michael Jordan here, if we were given the same amount of time. But I realized how much my teammates did not enjoy playing with me because I shot it every time. I didn't pass. If I cross half court, I was pulling up from the top of the key. And if I could get some breakaway layups, y'all rebound and throw it to me. And so I was this scorer, but I realized it was not any fun to play with me. In my eighth grade mind, it was this is okay though, because I put in way more time to my craft than you do.
Mhm.
And so because I live it, eat it, drink it, breathe it, you guys don't. You'll play football, then you may go to baseball season. This is all I do, guys. So in my mind, I just thought this was okay. What you realize is nobody enjoys playing a team sport with a person like that.
Yeah.
And so as I got older, you realize the value of incorporating others in this process. You realize the value of encouraging others through this process. You realize that if the ball is primarily going to be in your hands, can you provide direction to everybody else, that everybody's on the same page, the players and the people on the bench, whether that be your coaches or your fellow teammates? And so I think that the bad experience of shooting it every single time allowed me to realize, like, man, that's not any fun to play. These guys don't enjoy being on my team. But I never understood it from a coaching perspective as that's probably not very fun to watch.
Right.
To have to stomach somebody, and then I think what you realize is all of the intangibles that are needed. I mean, how many times I can recall scoring 38 points one time in an eighth grade game. We won 76-4, and I rarely cross half court. Somebody would rebound it and they would throw it to me, and I just had all these breakaway layups as I was trying to get 40 that particular night. And I can think to myself, like, man, you know what? I just walked out of here with 38. And did I ever acknowledge my teammates? Like,
Mhm.
it would have never have happened if those guys couldn't get a rebound and throw an outlet. And again, you're 13, 14, you don't understand it,
Right.
but you understand the need to celebrate other people's success, acknowledge their value. I think there's probably nothing worse from an academic standpoint when you get assigned to a group project and there's 4 of you working, and then there's that one guy who
Mhm.
just never shows up and he expects the same grade at you and like, hey, y'all got me right. And on the inside, there's a level of animosity. If you look at Ephesians chapter 4, where it talks about unity, it tells you, the one thing that makes people other upset is when you're working and they're not.
Mhm.
There's one way to create disunity. That's one of the things that I realized playing the position. And I think as you got older, you realize the value of everybody being on the same page, everybody having the same mission. And because the ball was in the point guard's hand the majority of the time, you needed to recognize how to incorporate everybody. And that's what happens in in coaching, right? Everybody has a stake in this program. Well, this guy isn't playing. Well, let me tell you what he is doing. He is up at 6 a.m. He is doing the same amount of running as you. He is at the same number of practices. He's doing all of those things. So we're not going to think that somebody's value and stake in this team is predicated on their playing time or on who they are scoring wise. So from all of that, I learned that lesson pretty early in the 8th grade.
Yeah, I love that. I would agree. I think an understanding of others and then just improving those leadership skills was huge. And I can't help but think of like that study when they followed around Steve Nash and how many fives he was given during a game,
Yeah.
right? It's like 300 or something. And
Yeah,
so,
we show our guys that even in the COVID era, LeBron leads per game at 41 high fives a game. And it's like, you want to know why he's good? He incorporates
right.
everybody into this process.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. So obviously you went to college basketball and, or went to college to play basketball, but that didn't happen. Tell us a little bit about what did happen and how that influenced you getting into coaching, please.
Sure. I cracked my bottom vertebrae on my spine one day diving for a loose ball. If you've ever seen steps, sometimes in a gym, they have concrete steps that kind of head up, and I dove out of bounds and landed awkwardly on my back trying to save it, and knew immediately that something was wrong. But I can remember being in the doctor's office and him telling me that, hey, your career is over. It's likely that you'll never play again. And for me, that's all I'd known. Like the intention was to be in the NBA. There was never a doubt I was going to be in the NBA. It wasn't as if it was a matter of like how many millions of dollars am I going to sign for? I mean, I just had an 18-year-old brain that this was going to happen. And so for me, it was I had put so much stock in the game of basketball. And what I did realize is even coaching, and it took some punches in the face for me in order to realize that, man, my identity is not wrapped
Hmm.
up in who God is and his purpose for me. My identity is wrapped up around a 12-ounce rubber ball. Like, imagine that. Imagine going through life and your identity is a 12-ounce rubber ball. Like, this is not going to end well for you. And so I had this wake up call for me pretty early. I was obviously very discouraged, very upset. Just thought I really had a future in it. But nobody, when they begin the game of basketball, wants to be a coach, or I don't know anybody. Everybody wants to play. And so the playing is the fun part. Coaching is rewarding, but you enjoy playing. And what I then realized is like, man, you know what? My gift is not playing. My gift is helping. And I wanted to help kids in the same areas where I grew up use the game of basketball to expand their horizons. It gave me an opportunity to get an education. It gave me an opportunity to see things that other people weren't privileged to see, to travel, to be in socioeconomic situations that others that I may never have otherwise have been in had it not been for basketball, and to see the value of other people. And so for that, I wanted others to have that experience. So I wanted to help them and I wanted them to go to the highest levels as possible. I say this a lot to our players. Let's use our God given abilities for God given reasons. And I wanted them to
It's
be
good.
able to help their families. I wanted them to be able to get the most out of what they were given from a basketball standpoint in regards to their abilities. And so I just became so motivated with how can I help? How can I help? How can I help? And you obviously had to get really good at teaching, but you had to let those guys know that the person matters to me most.
It's really good. You went into high school and you had a lot of early success. You know, when I look back on myself, by no means is this promoting but I know in my life I had some early success, and I've done some deep diving on that recently, and I can see the good of that, but I can also see the bad of that and what led that to in terms of maybe pride and ego and thinking I had everything figured out, right? Have you identified yourself? Is there good and bad of that for what you had in terms of early success as a coach?
Yeah, 100%. For me, after 6 years at the high school level, my last year, um, I believe I was coach of the year. It's been so long. But we went to a Final Four. We had just moved up a classification in the state of Texas, and we went to a Final Four, and it's kind of a big deal in the state of Texas. At least it was to me, and made a decision. That we had some changes in our administration athletically, and I was going to walk away from this particular situation where I was at. And I thought to myself, you know what? I'm the Phil Jackson of Texas high school basketball. This will not be a problem for me to find another job. And that was in May. Well, here's June, July, August, September, October, and I do not have a job. And you realized that my identity was in basketball, and I needed to be checked. My ego needed to be checked. I worked, but I was finding my identity in something that I never should have found my identity in. And that really um, aided me. I mean, those 5 months were as valuable to me in who I became and what I was, and ended up catching on in an operations spot at Rice University. And you're no longer the head coach. You're sitting there breaking down film and doing things, and you're contributing as much as you can, but you're not the shot caller anymore. And people look at you differently when you have a certain title versus when you don't. But I realized that, man, you know what? My identity can't get caught up in a title. My identity can't get caught up in a certain kind of job. My identity needs to be in Jesus Christ. And if he permits me the opportunity, as I'm devoted there to continue in the game of basketball, so be it. If he has different plans, so be it. But for me, it was I need to be fully committed to honoring Jesus in every facet of my life, and let God be fully responsible for what that looks like. And so for me, that was a major commitment. And had I not gone through that from an ego standpoint and an identity standpoint, I don't know that I could have ever been in this situation.
That's good. Thanks for sharing that. I want to jump into your experience here at Baylor. Of course, we just had Coach Drew on, and I've heard the story of you saying that you were 99% sure you weren't coming there or
Yeah.
going to take the job, but he asked you to pray about it. So obviously
Yeah.
the prayer changed things, huh?
Yeah, he did. I mean, I ended up talking to him for an hour when he originally taken the job. We'd kind of bumped into each other at a clinic, and I knew one of his assistants, and I just said, "Hey, send me his phone number. I'm gonna say, hey, if you ever need anything in the state of Texas, I've grown up here. I know a lot of people. Welcome to Texas. He was from Indiana. If I can ever help, let me know." And he answered, and I was like, man, I didn't think he would answer. It's like I just bumped into him 45 minutes ago at a clinic. I thought he'd still be speaking. I just wanted to leave a message. We ended up talking for an hour, and he says, "Would you consider coming up here?" And I knew the background of the situation. Obviously, it was that you're not in a good position, bro. You may have inherited one of the worst things. Well,
Ever.
obviously, one player killing another
Yeah.
is travesty, but this goes way beyond that. You're dealing with there are other humans there that you're going to have to navigate their world because they just lost a friend and they have questions, and you are in for some serious therapy roles and counseling roles there.
Yeah.
I don't even know that you're going to get to do basketball. And he asked me, Would you come up here and help me?" And I said, "No way. Like, I'm in a good situation. I'm from Houston. I'm not leaving the situation that I have here." And he said, "Well, I got to tell you, somebody told me that you were a Christian and a seriously a godly man. Wouldn't you at least pray about it?" And I was like, "That's not a fair comeback." And I said, "You know what, Scott? I will. You're right. I should pray about this, but I'm 99% certain God will say no to." Um, and so he calls me the next night. We talk for an hour. This goes on for 5 straight nights, and we're just talking basketball and recruiting and how difficult it is in the Big 12. And I said, listen, you've been as nice as you could be. My wife and I'll come up there and visit. Now, my motive for visiting was we were redoing our locker room at Rice University. And so I was trying to get as many ideas as possible. So I wanted to go see what Baylor's locker room looked like so I could steal those some ideas and incorporate it with what we were doing at Rice. And I just felt that, man, you know what? These guys are really genuine. They really love the Lord. They are sincere about helping these players. And my heart began to change the more and more I was around, not just Scott, but the entire staff, Matt Driscoll, Jerome Tang, Mark Moorfield. And I just said to myself, you know what? These are really genuine men who care about players, because Willis Wilson was one of those guys who I worked for at Rice. But I'd been around enough basketball coaches to know that they wanted to use the players in order to advance something of themselves. And I thought, you know what? These guys want to use the game to help the players. And to get to do it at a Big 12 level was obviously unique. And so I changed my mind.
Yeah, for sure. And what an experience. Yeah, I can't imagine. It has to be the craziest situation ever. And it's obvious that there was a vision and obviously, you know, it was easy for players and coaches to buy into all of that. But what was it like then? I mean, this is probably one of those things where you said when you went through it, you didn't enjoy it as much, but it probably made all you better individually and collectively. What was it like night in and night out in the Big 12? Because at that time, and obviously still a great conference, but just a plethora of Hall of Fame coaches. I mean, was that a blessing in disguise?
Yeah, I mean, you're cutting your teeth. Scott he had taken the job at 32. Jerome Tang who's now the associate head coach. He was a high school coach, as was I. I had 1 year of experience of Division One, and so other than Matt Driscoll, who had been at Clemson for 5 years, all of us were new. We didn't know any better. Like, one, we were really young, 20s, early 30s. We didn't know. I always tell people, if somebody would have taken that job 55, 60, 65, who understood how difficult that was, I don't know if they would have been able to get it done. We were just a young bunch of optimists who just worked our tails off. We went till about 2, 3 o'clock in the morning every day. We were all back at 8 a.m. and we were just in there grinding away and working and trying to get recruits and all of that. But I I going through that, you're having to cut your teeth against Eddie Sutton, Hall of Famer, Bobby Knight, Hall of Famer. I mean, the people night in and night out who you had to go against. Rick Barnes is going to be a Hall of Famer. Lon Kruger at Oklahoma will be a Hall of Famer. Bill Self is a Hall of Famer. And you're just like, holy cow. So that's a different level of basketball. And you realize, one, there is a talent that you have to have in order to be competitive. But at the same time, there was a level of preparation that you needed to be on top of, and the adjustments that occurred during the game that those guys obviously taught us. My second year there, we won one Big 12 game the whole year. We were 1-16 in conference, and they weren't close. And then my last year, 2017, we were number one in the country. So I watched the whole pendulum swing,
Mhm.
and I will tell you that, I mean, before every meeting, whether it be preparing for a game or recruiting, we prayed because we were very mindful of the psalm that said, unless the Lord builds the house, you're laboring in vain. And we knew that we needed to commit whatever opportunities we had to God, knew that we were stewards of whatever time and responsibilities. So I say all of that to say, uh, we are better because of the Bill
Yeah, for
Selfs,
sure.
Bob Knight, Rick Barnes, Lon Krugers, Eddie Suttons of the world.
Yeah, for sure. I get that. That's awesome. So leaving Baylor then and coming to Oral Roberts, aside from the fact it was high school to head or high school to college, excuse me, from the last time you had a head job, what was different about it this time for you? I mean, is there something that when you go back these couple years, can you pinpoint something or remember something specifically that was different this time around in that chair?
Yeah. One, to be honest with you, at first it wasn't different. I mean, you were an assistant coach, and so your responsibilities were recruiting and development of players. So that was my job when I got here. I needed to do a great job recruiting, identifying young men who you believed you could help, and then you needed to develop those abilities on and off the court. It wasn't until you actually started coaching did you experience it. And we were 1-7 to start my first year. The previous year, ORU had won 6 Division I games the entire year. So I knew that, and the majority of those players left, and we didn't add anybody. And so I knew it was going to be a long year. We lost by 42 to Oklahoma State. And Bill Self texted me after the game and said, "Man, I only lost by 41 the first time when I was head coach at ORU to Oklahoma State." I was like, "Thanks, coach. Appreciate it." But I was 1-7, and I can remember thinking this may have been a bad decision. I had it a lot easier as an assistant coach, coaching a top 5 team from what I experienced my last 5 years to being in this situation. And what I realized is, one, just take a breath, and then two, that listen, whether I was at Baylor or whether I was at ORU, God is with me. And you know what? Regardless of how things look, God is with me. And so my job is to be faithful. I need to show up for these guys. I need to show up for these teams that we're preparing against. I need to be prepared. And I do think that the punches in the face originally, I mean, when you're one, because you go in there thinking, all right, we're going to be 10-0. I know some things maybe other people don't. And I soon realized that, listen, you're not smarter than anybody else. You probably don't work harder than anybody else. As hard as you work, your job is just show up every day and be faithful and let those kids know you're faithful. Because Brad Soderberg from Virginia shared this with me. He's an assistant there. The most faithful win, and the people that show up every day over the course of time. And so what for me, I kind of took a step back and realized, like, okay, you're not going to be national coach of the year after 3 games. This is going to take time, and you need to understand that. And so for me, that's when at 1-7 was like my gut punch.
Yeah, for sure. Been there, done that. Hey, just in 2 quick things here, and then we'll hop into rapid fire. In your opinion, what makes a good coach? What makes a good boss? So we have sports and business probably listening. What are some things that you can think of?
The same thing. It's love. I tell our players all the time, it is your job to love each other. It is our job to love you. They've heard 1 John 3:18 so many times. Love is not done with word or tongue. It's done in deeds and in truth. We can say a whole lot of things. But love is not meant to be done with our words. Love is not meant to be done just with our tongue, just to say things. Love is meant to be demonstrated. They need to know that there's an action there. And so whether you're a coach or whether you're a boss, people need to know that you have their back. The other thing that they need to know is that you're going to tell them the truth, that I am going to treat you honestly. People who I think what happens, especially when you're dealing with players, is they're not always treated honestly. They're told something that may be true. Um, uh, eh, Wounds from a friend can be trusted, but the enemy will multiply kisses. Like, we're here to be honest with you. It does us no good they hear me say this one a lot. Genuine love does not enable bad behavior. Genuine love isn't going to let you continue to use an extreme example, smoke crack. Genuine love is not going to enable bad behavior. Genuine love is going to confront. You're going to get me off on a tangent here, but David is called a man after God's own heart, not because he was perfect. In my opinion, I had this explained to me by a professor in seminary. It's because he confronted his sin. When Nathan tells him, "You're the man," David says, "Man, I need to deal with this issue." And David was willing to confront. Why? because of love.
Right.
He was with, that's why Jesus confronted sin, because of love. So you know what love does? Love is honest. And so I would tell you that the same two attributes for a coach or for a boss is that love is action. People need to know that you're, man, I am with you. I'm not against you. I'm fighting for you. We're on this thing together. But you know what else love is? It's treating you honestly.
Right.
It's dealing with you honestly. And I think that needs to happen in a corporate environment. And I think it needs to happen in an athletic environment, because people get deceived by lies, and lies sound better than the truth. But we have to deal with this head on in our approach corporately and in the athletic field.
I love it, Coach. That's good. Well, hey, last thing before we hop in here, I'd be anxious to know how you learn, favorite books we always talk about on here. I know we could go off to your master's degree or memorizing every
Yeah.
Hoosiers line here, but if you could fill us in maybe with of course, I know you read the Bible, but what is a book you're reading now maybe, or what are some books that have resonated with you over time, or just in general how you learn?
Yeah, I'll go one. Unbroken. It is just a wonderful story. The movie does not do it justice because they take out the Christian aspect of Unbroken. If you could get it on an audiobook, which I think is tremendous, the audiobook, and you can just listen to it, but the audiobook of Unbroken's phenomenal. If you have time to sit down and read it, you have a lot of time, but maybe you can incorporate it into your exercise regime. I would tell you another good one is Robert Iger, who is the retired CEO of Disney. His autobiography is really good. And it's not from a Christian perspective, but just from a leadership perspective, how he approached things. He obviously, when he became Disney, bought ESPN. He took over, bought the whole Star Wars, bought Pixar. To hear his style and how he would get things done, he was such a people person. You're going to want to start having breakfast and lunch with everybody after meeting Robert Iger, because you realize he did all of these deals. Like, let's meet for breakfast. And
Yeah.
he would throw out these huge proposals because he had this vision, and it wouldn't happen immediately. It would happen over the course of time. But his heart for people, and his approach, I think he may end up wanting running for president at some point. But I thought that was tremendous, just from a vision casting standpoint, and really just how to get things done. I thought that one was a great book.
Good, good. Thank you. Well, hey, rapid fire. Back to eighth grade here. You can shoot it all you want. All right, three
Yeah.
pointers. Number one, if people could learn only one thing from this talk and grab hold on to it, what would you want it to be?
Know Jesus Christ.
Good, thank you. Number two, if Coach Mills could have came over here today and sat in Kevin's chair and asked Coach Mills a question, what question would have you asked that I did not ask today?
I think a lot of coaches want to figure out, how do coaches rise, right?
Okay.
What would you recommend in order to become a Division I basketball coach?
Anything you want to add in there real quick?
Work. The proximity principle is huge to me. Go put yourself around people who you think do it well, and try to learn from them as much as possible.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Well, hey, finally, good stuff is the name of this, as you know. Just what's some other good stuff that you can give us in closing? Maybe something else in general, or anything you feel is appropriate at this time.
Yeah, I would tell you, we do a thing here called Mills, MILLS, to where the more you can just go sit down with people and fellowship with them, whether it be one on one or two on two. COVID is it's prevented us from doing it for the past year, so we haven't had these opportunities. But I do think, especially when you're dealing with young people, that if you can get them around a table, I think opportunities flow more, especially when there's opportunities. Every time you ever look at fellowship in Scripture, there's eating involved. And so I've kind of taken that approach as well. And so I would just encourage people, hey, go spend time with others. And the more you can do it over a meal, probably the better.
All right, man. Wasn't 40 points, but 3 for 3 there. Hey, appreciate that. Where can our listeners finally, where can they connect to you social media wise, and obviously anything with the program, Coach?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Coach Mills. And then I don't have anything else. No Instagram, no Snap. I don't I don't have a Facebook. So Twitter's pretty much it. And I'm not on there much, but you can email me at P as in Paul Mills, MILLS at oru.edu. I do read all of those. And we'll get back to all of you eventually at some point.
All right, Coach. Well, hey, man, thanks so much for spending time with us. Like I said, I didn't when I was watching the NCAA tournament, I didn't know much about you. I'm glad that I not only got to know more about you and your program, but spend some time with you here today. This is going to add a ton of value. Congrats on the past season. Continued success moving forward. It's not real hard for me to root for a guy like you. So thanks again.
Kevin, thank you. And I'm telling you, do not ever, you would downgrade that sign if you ever switched it. So don't switch the sign.
We'll see what we do. As long as it doesn't fall apart, we'll see what we can do. But thanks again. Well, hey, everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it. As always, you can reach out to me, as you know by now, goodstuffkevin@gmail.com. Love to hear your takeaways from this episode. Till next time, good stuff.